Today, I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about finances, but not like accounting finances. It's more like how thinking about your finances can help you grow as a business owner and an author. And I brought in a special guest to help me talk about that topic because I am not a financial whiz.
Are you an entrepreneur, small business owner, or consultant looking to boost your authority, influence, and impact? The Author Switch podcast with best-selling, award-winning author Carma Spence is your answer. Tune in for actionable advice, powerful strategies, and engaging interviews to turn on your author switch and take your business to the next dimension.
The Author Switch.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Switch podcast. My name is Carma Spence, your host, and I help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write, market, and publish client-attracting books so that they can grow their businesses. Now, today I have a special guest, Lowell Mora, who is president of Impact CFO. He brings a wealth of expertise in leading small to mid-sized businesses. His extensive experience spans both family-owned and private equity-owned companies, making him a versatile and strategic advisor to CEOs. Lowell excels in driving record growth and profitability, particularly in equipment business models, working with manufacturers and industrial products, percentage of completion accounting, and managing multi-million-dollar contracts. He is also proficient in leading ERP implementations. With his deep financial leadership across diverse industries, Lowell offers a unique perspective on every project. As a fractional CFO, he provides invaluable financial oversight, guiding numerous businesses through complex transactions and strategic initiatives. His expert financial guidance has helped businesses navigate transitions and achieve their financial goals with precision and expertise. Focused on driving growth and profitability, Lowell collaborates with businesses of all sizes to implement cost-effective strategies and streamline operations, ensuring long-term success. Welcome to the podcast, Lowell.
Hi, Karma. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Well, I have to admit, this is a little bit outside my wheelhouse because numbers are not my favorite things. In fact, don't get near me when I'm paying the bills because otherwise I'll screw them all up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a common thing. It's a common bond in the world. No matter what you do in the world, you still have to pay your bills and count your money
Yes.
and deal with it. So those of us who are trained in that try to help other people with that. So
Indeed. And that's why I thought it was worthwhile to have this conversation because as business owners and as authors, we need to understand, even if we don't do them ourselves, we need to understand them, not only so that we know they're going the right direction, but so that we also know that the people we hire to help us with them are not doing bad things.
right.
So I understand that you kind of specialize in not only family-owned businesses, but also in exiting those family-owned businesses. So first of all, let's set some groundwork. What exactly do you do in that area?
So I work primarily with family-owned businesses. The typical small to mid-sized family-owned business doesn't have the business size or financial expertise to have a full-time CFO. CFOs are kind of expensive. So I focus on those businesses that would benefit from the executive level strategic planning, advice, and guidance of a CFO, a finance type person, but can't necessarily afford it. And in that niche, what I really do is I try to get businesses as early as possible into my program so we can plan, because you can't just decide to snap your fingers and plan a transition or an exit or to improve your profitability or your growth initiatives. The other thing that I find staggering, and it's really true, is that nearly 50% of all family-owned businesses end up in bankruptcy within 2 years after the death of the founder or the current owner. Now, why is that? There's a multitude of reasons that I could talk about for hours, but primarily it's a lack of planning, right? And what do they tell us when we're very young. If you fail to plan, plan to fail. And the real reason that I do what I do is I love what I do. I like doing it. I worked for many companies over my career, mostly family owned. But in my current role as that fractional CFO, I can help many family owned businesses avoid that, plan ahead, put a transition plan in place, protect not only the families that own the business, but then all the other stakeholders in the business, all the employees, customers, vendors. I mean, a 50% bankruptcy rate is staggering to me. So,
Way too high, way too
yeah.
high.
So hopefully that makes sense to what I do a little bit.
Right. Now, we were talking a little bit before that it's not just about numbers, it's also about the mindset around those numbers. Can you talk a little bit about that, and kinds of mindsets do people need to have in order to face a transition?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's sort of like facing your mortality, right? Because many of the business owners and the industries that I primarily work in are manufacturing and industrial products, even some professional services businesses. They're typically overwhelmingly males and they're into their years of the 60s and 70s. And they've built up so much of their identity as part of is built into that business that they can't imagine what they would do if they weren't part of that business. And it's a I think it's a generational issue that's facing us, and it's hard to convince somebody to let go of what is their life's work. So a lot of times spouses help a lot in convincing people who run those businesses, hey, let's do something else. You don't have to do this forever. You don't have to do it to be happy. It's a feeling of utility and what they've always done. I think it sort of comes from I'm one of the oldest Gen Xers, and we view things a little bit differently than the boomers. And so much, even I see in my mentality, comes from my parents who were brought up by depression generation people. So it's that you got to keep working, you can't stop, you can't enjoy. And at some point, you have to have other things that you enjoy in your life. So it's not a simple thing. So people that own businesses need to work on their whole set of, I don't know what you call it, experiences or hobbies or goals. It can't
Mhm.
just be your business, right?
Right.
And I compare it, I'd like to do, I'm in my mid 50s. I'd like to do this for 15 more years because I really love what I'm doing. But if something happened and I had to stop today and I could pay my bills, I have plenty of things to do, but I'd like to keep doing it and I wouldn't be miserable, if you know what I'm saying. But,
Yeah,
as each generation goes on, we have different views. You
exactly.
can't convince somebody if they don't believe in it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Now, I understand that in order to make the transition, part of that transition is making, well, I guess there's 2 things to look at. One is, can I pass this on to my children? Are they capable of keeping the business going? Or you can sell it to some third party. How do you make those decisions,
Yeah.
and what kinds of things do you need to have in place to make those decisions?
Well, it's typically a lot easier if another family member wants to come into the business. But those family members have to have two things. One is they have to have the capabilities to do it, and they have to have the desire to do it. And in a lot of cases in the previous generations, people that either didn't have either of those or neither were drawn into businesses because that was just what the families did. Now, I think people are listening a lot more and saying, hey, I have really great kids, but they're not interested in making the widgets that I make. So they should go on and do what they want to do. So that's the first thing is the desire and then the capability. Gets a little bit more complicated when they have the desire to do it, but not the capability, right? You have to mentor them and help them through that. But even when you decide that it's a family member, there's still practical things that have to happen because you have to have the ownership lines very, very clear. Just because one kid came into the business doesn't mean they own the business. I always recommend to all business owners when it's time for you to step out, you need to have a clean transaction with the generation or the child that's going to buy the business. So you should really sell it to them so as not to muddy up the rest of the estate and inheritance, right? It's the ownership that matters. So here's a clear example. If you have two children and you sell the business to one child who's in the business, the other child wants nothing to do with it for $10 million. So then the parent gets $10 million, which goes into his estate. So in theory, if it's split equally when the parents are deceased, each of the kids get $5 million. But the one who bought the business had to pay the $10 million in order to get the rights to run the business and own the business. So you have to
Right.
keep those lines really clear. When you get to, it's a lot less emotional or somewhat less emotional when you decide that there's nobody to buy the business, right? Sometimes owners will try and sell it to a current employee who's been with them a long time. That still needs to be an arm's length transaction with the right valuations and financing and all those things. But when you go to the external market, it gets a little more complicated. And again, it depends on the size of the business and if you're going to use business brokers, if you're going to use an investment bank, all those types of things, and how you're going to market the business. But more important than doing the actual marketing of the business is having the business ready to be sold. So if you go to sell the business and you have all these explanations of why you didn't do well or you can do better or all that, it's very, very difficult. It's pretty simple in the marketplace. The market values a business by what is the earnings of the business, which is really a measure that's used called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And an industry has a multiple times that. So if your EBITDA is $1 million and the multiple is 5, then your business is worth $5 million, roughly. Now, there's lots of ways to get at it and crack it, but that's how the market measures the business. Now, if you don't have the earnings, then your business is going to be worth less. So you have to do all the work to put your business into a position where somebody can come in and evaluate that to make sure it's right.
Now, you raised an interesting question. What if the business has no buyers and won't have any buyers, and so they have to close it up? They have to close up shop. Is
I
that
mean,
something you help too?
that does happen, and that's very unfortunate because there usually is an inherent value in the business besides just the fixed assets. Like if you were going to do that and there's nobody to buy the business and it's not viable, then you could sell off the assets of the business. If you own a building, any machinery and equipment, any inventory, and those types of things. But that's not typically where you want to get. Most
No.
business has an intrinsic value, a branding or experience and
Yeah.
expertise that's above the just the physical assets of the business.
That reminds me of something that happened in my past. I got a job in a PR firm called Graceland and Burns. Graceland had exited the business and sold it to Burns. Now Burns is the owner. Then I come on board, and while I'm there during the 6 months I was there, he got cancer and died. And he tried to sell it to his top employee. She decided, I don't want to own a business. So without her, it was just her and me. I
Mhm.
was not, I was fresh out of college. I wasn't going to be buying a business. So he had to close it up, which is really unfortunate because it was a really good, powerful PR firm. The problem was it was his firm and he was the brains behind it.
The
So
problem is you have to have other people who can help you out. That's the other thing that goes on. So much goes through one person in a business that before you can sell it, you have to start training other people to be able to run the business. A lot of times, an acquirer will come in and say, yeah, I'd like to buy your business, but I want to sign you to a contract for 2 or 3 years. I'm going to own the business, but I want you to stay and help me run it for a period of time because you have all these expertise and all these
right.
experience. And then that transition chain happens. If it's a bigger business, it's not quite as critical because there's usually people who know how to run the operations and the owner isn't producing all the product that comes out. But those are all very, very valid questions and things that happen all the time.
I bet. Now, of course, this podcast is called The Author Switch. So I want to bring in the idea of books and authors. What if the founder writes a book about his self or his business or something that becomes an asset within the business, does a book increase the value of the business for this founder?
I mean, I would think that it would have to, right? So if you think about most of the businesses that people run, they're usually experts in that area, right? So if they go to a trade show or a convention, they're an expert on what they do. And if they have a unique product or technology, then they can monetize that. You can monetize that through doing, whether it's a book or an article or something like that. You want to prove to people that you're an expert on what you're doing. So let's say that somebody has a special technique of making, let's just say he has a special technique for making these pens, right? And he has that. And nobody else knows it. If he writes a book about how that person got into the business, how he developed the pen, how he did all that, and get some press on it, there's no such thing as bad press, right? Well, yeah, there is bad press, but if you can get people to understand and know what you are, anytime you're published or you can find something on a person about them, something they wrote or did on the internet or an actual book, it can only increase their authority. I don't know if the word's the authority, but them as being an expert in what you're looking at, right? That would be a good way to do it. It's, you think about it with, the same as with academics, right? Getting published makes you more expert or gets you more publicity. The average person doesn't read the technical journals and the books about, mundane science activities, but the people who would be looking at those technologies and looking at that would be interested in that. Kind of getting them to think about writing a book and doing it, right? But there's lots of
Yes.
ways to write. I know I've heard of lots of people who write books who, you know, can translate their ideas and have people write it for them, or if you can get your ideas on paper, then somebody can make it pretty for you, I think.
Right. Right. Well, I'd like to go into this topic a little bit more, but first
Uh-huh.
let's take a quick break. Do you feel intimidated by the idea of marketing your book? Many authors believe that without marketing expertise, their book will struggle to find readers. The complexities of marketing can be daunting, leaving you feeling unqualified, unsure where to start. The fear of your book languishing in obscurity can be overwhelming. Introducing Serve Up Your Book, the ultimate guide to book marketing for non-experts. This comprehensive guide helps you lay the foundations with easy-to-follow strategies that demystify the marketing process. Build your audience using straightforward, effective techniques. Generate pre-launch buzz with step-by-step instructions that make it simple to create excitement. Launch your book with clear, actionable plans that ensure your efforts are impactful. Continue marketing your book after the launch with ongoing strategies to keep your book in the spotlight. With user-friendly advice and practical tips, Serve Up Your Book is designed for authors at any level. Get your copy of Serve Up Your Book available now on Amazon. Hello, and welcome back to the Author Switch. My name is Carma Spence, and I help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write, market, and publish their books so that they can grow their business by attracting clients with that asset. Today, I'm talking with Lowell Mora, who is the founder of Impact CFO, and we're talking about finances. Really sexy topic, right? So before the break, we were talking a little bit about family-owned businesses and how you make that transition to passing that business on to another individual, whether it be in the family or to someone else. And then we started touching on a little bit about how a book could play in that overall valuation of a business. So Lowell, we talked about how the book would increase someone's authority. But do you think it also plays a role in making the business itself valuable once the author of that book is no longer part of that business?
Well, to the point of it's communicating that expertise, that special or that uniqueness of the business, whether it's a technology or a certain culture. If you
Mhm.
can communicate that to somebody who's potentially going to buy the business, then they may know what that secret sauce is to run that business. And that
Right.
will increase the value, the future value of the business, right? We're talking to a finance guy, so I get caught up in the value today of how you value it and then it's sold. But if you can bottle that secret sauce that made that business successful for all those years and carry it on after the founder or the owner is gone, sure, there'd be a lot of value in that.
I guess it would depend on what kind of book you wrote. Like if you wrote a book of like how I did something, that might not translate into the business. But if you were writing a book that was more about the business and how that business runs, operates, or helps people, then it becomes an asset within the business itself without the author.
Right, correct. Because so then you'd want to make sure that you have the rights to use that book. Who's,
Right.
you could say, hey, I don't, the person who wrote it, the former owner can have the royalties on it, but is that something that we can use in our advertising, our marketing to show our expertise about what we do and how we do it?
Exactly. Now there becomes the planning. When you're starting to figure out, I know that let's just say it's me. I'm planning on letting go of the author switch. I'm not going to, but you'd probably pry it from my cold dead hands. But let's just say I'm thinking I want to increase its value. I want to get it to a place where someone else can take the helm so I can go off and sip beverages with umbrellas in them at some exotic beach. What are the things I need to be thinking about to make sure that this company can exist without me?
Well, the first thing is you have to be able to impart the basic operations to somebody else, right? And if you want to make as much of a value on it as you can, you have to continue to grow your followership, your listeners, and it's all in the end, a value of something is in how much profit it has. That's in the monetary sense. If you're more interested in just carrying it on, yeah, then any business needs to have, in the standard jargon, we call them SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures, right?
Yep.
I go on the assumption that if somebody gets hit by a bus, whether it's the owner of the business or somebody who's processing orders, somebody needs to know what they're doing because nobody
Right.
else is doing it in theory. It comes into cross training and all that stuff. So you really need to make sure that it can be the business and the processes in the business can be duplicated, right? If somebody simply doesn't know how to sell the product, right? You have to teach somebody how to sell the product if the person who's selling the business did all the sales, right? All those
Right.
kinds of things. There's a lot that goes into that, but that's the real key if you want to carry it on. And some things are, you talk about your podcast. Your podcast is, I would assume, a labor of love.
Right now it definitely is.
So, you wouldn't want something to happen to it. You would like the legacy of it going on. So
Right.
there's a piece that comes in with owners that one piece is the legacy and two is the money and the monetary, right?
Right.
Sometimes bigger businesses, they sell them. Once you sell a business, you can't really control what happens and big companies change things and do it. They like to know that, hey, this is still around in this way, shape, and form, and our products are still being sold and helping people. So you have to balance those two things to make sure that that can happen.
Right. And I totally understand the value of SOPs and I need to write them. It's like they're on my to-do list.
Right. We all need those things and have to do them. And I have my own business, which is fairly small. And then somebody will ask me, "Well, are you doing that in your own business?" I said, yes. But then I go back and I think, yes, I have to do that. We all have to do that in our own business, no matter how small they are, because
Right.
things can get out of control, right? It's the same thing. You have
Right.
to make lists for people in your family, because if something happens to you, who knows? And you pay all the bills, or where the life insurance is, or where. So that's what you have to do, because otherwise they won't know what to do if something unfortunate happens.
Right. And given that I was hit by a car in 2016, I am painfully aware of
Wow.
my mortality.
Yeah, as we all get older, we get more and more aware of it. So, but it's easy to not focus on it, and it's easy to
Oh yeah.
just think everything's going to keep going on the way that it always has, and it doesn't always end up that way.
So let's say you've got a new client who is an author-based business. They've basically built their business around books, using books to market it, to build it. And of course, they have other, they have products and services that those books market. What advice would you give that person to get their business in a financial state where they could hand it off either to a child or to another business individual who wanted to buy it?
Yeah, so it's not much different than any other business, really, in all honesty. You have to have good, sustainable, profitable revenues, right? One of the biggest things, and I don't know if this is a thing in the book industry, because it's ending up in consumers' hands typically, most books or readers, right? Is you don't want to have a very high percentage of your sales going through one customer or one channel. Because if something goes wrong with that client, that customer, then if it has 50% of your business or 60% or more, then your business will take a big hit. And that's
Right.
something that business owners don't think about very often.
And I
People,
think that would make sense in a small business because often those clients are doing business with you personally, not your business.
right, right. And I see that very often. And I'm not saying that you should get rid of that client that you do 80% of your business with, but you need to grow your other client base so it's not as big a percentage as it might
Mhm.
otherwise be, because then you're at risk of something going wrong with that. What happens if that business goes out of business, right? Yeah, and you want to make sure, I mean, in any business, and I'm talking financial jargon here, you want to make sure your balance is clean, right? Your balance
Okay.
sheet is clean, right? You want to make sure your balance sheet is clean. You want your clients to pay you in a orderly fashion and in time, right? So you're paying your vendors in a reasonable amount of time. If you're borrowing money to do something, how much debt do you have on the business? Don't take out debt that you can't handle. What's your inventory look like? If your business is books and you bought a book and it's not selling, and it's sitting on the shelves, what are you doing with it, right? So any business having a lot of excess inventory is very dangerous because it's just taking up space. And even if you paid $10 for something and you can sell it for $2, it's better than having it sit on the shelf and do nothing. Pay
Thank God for
money.
print on demand and no inventory.
Yeah, that's a better model today. But all those kinds of things.
So, what would be your number one piece of advice to the people who are listening here about what you do and what would help them manage their finances better?
Yeah, again, I would say, eh, being selfish, I would say get somebody to help you, right? Remember
Mhm.
that your business, and I'm talking about a business, right? A business is an asset, just the same as your home and your real estate is, your investments, your stocks and bonds. And people don't oftentimes think about it that way. And I'm sort of the person, and this is the way I look at it, your financial team or your staff is kind of the person that's helping you maximize the value and the efficiency of that business, the same as your wealth advisor is helping you with your stocks and bonds and optimizing that and your insurance and all those kinds of things. A lot of times people don't think of that as an asset, right? If you have a large business, it could be a disproportionately big part of your net worth, and you're not thinking of it that way. And
Right.
where people like me come in is think about all of the things that you own, whether it's something physical, stocks, bonds, something real estate, autos, your business is an asset. And think of it that way, and don't be afraid to plan for the change or the transition. Because whether we want to or not, it's coming. And I say the same thing to young people that I work with who have startup businesses or they're young entrepreneurs. Yeah, you're 35, but what happens if you get sick?
Yeah.
What's going to happen to this business? You have to have a plan.
Oh, I remember not that long ago, I was just reaching out to someone on LinkedIn and he was like 30, 32, and he said, I can't set up a call right now because I just got back from the doctor and found out that I have cancer and I've got
Mhm.
about a month to live." I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I
Yeah, but those things happen.
those things happen.
There's never perfect solutions, but you have to have contingencies in place.
And I understand with smaller businesses, it's really, especially the people I work with, it's really easy to get your personality tied up into your business. And I think what we talked about today is really quite a wake up call is that as much as you love what you do and you love your business, you have to think of it as in some way a separate entity that can live on past you.
Exactly. Yep, definitely.
Now, is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you would like to make sure that my audience knows?
Not really. I think we covered most of what the key things are. I'd love for anybody to reach out to me. The name of my business is Impact CFO, and I've got my website up there, www.impactcfo.net.
Which I will also put in the show notes.
Right. You can go there. There's several ways on the website to get a hold of me. There's several free offers I have on there, a free consultation, a free meeting, a free cash flow worksheet that you can fill out, download, and then we set up a meeting and talk about it. Feel free to just email me directly. It's simply Lowell, Lowell at impactcfo.net, or get on the old fashioned telephone and give me a call, 847-212-4081. But yeah, just think about your planning and don't ignore it for too long, because we all do that, and you can't stop the march of time for sure.
No, you can't. Well, this is the end of this episode of the Author Switch podcast. I hope you found it useful, and I will see you next week. This is your host, Carma Spence, saying ciao for now.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Author Switch podcast. If you enjoyed today's show and want to support its mission, here's how to help. First, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your engagement helps my channel grow and reach more aspiring and established authors. Your ratings and reviews are invaluable. They help me reach more listeners and continue delivering top-notch content. To catch up on past episodes, including those no longer available on podcast platforms, visit authorswitch.com/episodes. There, you can choose to watch or listen to your favorite episodes at your convenience. If you'd like to show additional support, consider dropping a tip in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/Carma Spence. Your contributions help keep the podcast running and are greatly appreciated. Thank you for being a part of the Author Switch community. Until next time, keep writing.